presentation. And tonight we have our honored fire chiefs for the Seldovia Village Tribe, Barabara Heights Volunteer Fire Department, and Andrew Mattox from the City of Seldovia Fire and EMS. They will be talking about wildfire and Firewise programs and fire prevention and fires in general. Rick Harkness is the fire chief for Seldovia Village Tribe, Barabara Heights Department, and so there are two jurisdictions. Andrew's the fire chief for within the city limits, and Rick is the fire chief for the Barabara Heights fire division from the city limits all the way out past Jackaloff Bay and the SNA area. Yeah, we'll get started with them in just a second. We're going to have two drawings of everybody who is attending, and there are two names will be picked from everyone, and each name picked will get a fire extinguisher. So that's coming up toward the end. If you attend 3 of these emergency preparedness viewings, presentations, you get an emergency preparedness kit given from Seldovia Village Tribe. Yeah, and then also on Friday coming up, Friday the 29th, we will have Healthy Chatter via Zoom, and we will have our featured speaker will be Jason Harriman. He's a biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and Jason will talk about living in bear country. The focus of the conversation will be how to minimize human-bear conflicts and what Seldovians can do to decrease negative interactions and increase positive bear interactions. We will cover topics such as minimizing attractions, proper fencing, effectiveness of bear spray, and any other questions that the community may have. And we hope you'll join us for that. If you have questions, you can, there's a question section here that you can write your question in, and we'll get them to Rick and Andrew to answer. And so welcome everybody and enjoy the presentation. And here are our distinguished fire chiefs.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Mattox, and I'm about to share my screen if you're viewing, so that our slideshow is visible, and how we'll run this is I'm going to walk through the slides, and Rick and I are going to sort of hand off a bit, like as we're going through. Let us know if you have any questions. And
Andrew?
Yes?
If I can let Alex know. Alex, if you hit escape, your screen should be not full size, and you should still be able to see the chats. Otherwise, it probably took over your entire screen. If you need, I can't hear you, but otherwise we'll.
Thank you, we got it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, thank you. And I will start in. You know, a nice photograph of a forest fire at night. They're often pretty amazing views. Rick has experience on some of the forest fires around here, and he'll like add in like if he has any other experience as well, and that he'd like to speak of. He and I will also have a number of stories throughout this presentation, and I was a Forest Service firefighter for 6 years, so that's my background in forest fire. Rick, is there anything else that you want to add in initially?
No, that's pretty much it. and I've done very little of the forest fire fighting, you know, for wildland, even though that that's what I have to deal with here. And I've dealt with a few, nothing major, thank you though. So anyways, and this is a good graphic of what it does look like inside the fire.
And like, and as everyone is hearing, I think I have a little bit of a stutter. So if sometimes I just stop and shut down, everybody just hang out for a minute. I'm okay. I'm not having a heart attack. I'm just stuttering. And as our overall structure here, we, you know, have over an hour available, but we don't think we're going to be nearly as long as that. And the sections of this slideshow are it starts with just speaking about forest fire a bit, how it acts, how it's fought, all of that. Like, and it's just kind of orientation to make it a little bit less mysterious. Then we have a look more at our specific environment, and then we really look a lot more into what you can personally do to protect your home and other assets and things like that. Heading on to our first slide. So we're actually landing it initially on the punchline here of, you know, our fire risk here is generally pretty dang low. We are not in a fire ecology, meaning that natural forest fires are very rare here. We don't have a lot of starts, but also our environment obviously is generally wet. What we worry about is unusually hot and dry conditions, and then adding on a lot of wind onto that. And like I say, unusually hot and dry, and for us often that's fairly extreme. But we get a lot of wind here. So if stuff is hot and dry enough that we do have a fire risk and we put a 50-mile-an-hour wind on it, that situation is very rare, but it can be very hazardous. One of our worries here is really about having that situation start, and that we are so remote. Like if we have a significant forest fire here, we will be ordering up professional specialized forest firefighting resources, but we'll have a lag in between when we ask for that and when they arrive, and we're so remote that lag may be very long. We like also have some ability, of course, to fight small forest fires on our own here, and for the wildfires that we've had here, as far as I'm aware of, and Rick has more of a historic knowledge of this, we've just handled all of those on our own. As far as the main thing that you can do, we'll have a look at this fairly thoroughly in a while. But the big thing is just having an awareness of what's a fire hazard around your, you know, home, around your office, around all of that, how to lessen that, and what's important for you to think about when. We're in an environment where, you know, usually forest fire is not a significant risk. I have often had firewood stacked under my house because hypothermia is more of a risk for me than forest fire in most cases. So you shouldn't feel as if, you know, oh my God, I have to clear everything around my house always and that has to be great. But if we're in a hot, um, dry situation, there are things you might want to think about then. And there are other things that handling in the moment is hard, but when you're, say, adding an addition onto your house or something, you might want to think about some of the features. What we really worry about here is, as I express it, the 1% problem, and that is like the 1% of the most extreme environmental conditions when that wildfire is a risk here, and the 1% of all of us on our worst day. When for some reason, you know, we do something foolish that we ordinarily wouldn't, or a really and that starts a fire. Is there anything that you want to add on at this point, Rick?
No, that's a good summary of what we have to look at as the fire department. And we do, and it changes. I mean, every day it's different. In the wintertime, it's kind of just steady because of the snow and the rain, and it's cold. But this time of year, it changes. And the biggest thing right now is going from the snow, which is all melted back off and is gone, to all the brown, dry, dead grasses and leaves and stuff from last year, and waiting for it to green up really good. In the past week, it's greened up a lot here. And I just, every time it does this time of year, when it starts to green up, I don't worry quite as bad. And it doesn't take much to get a fire going. So, but right now, everything is going good. The temperatures are low, the humidity is high, and we aren't getting good rain, but it's, you know, every couple of days we've been getting these little showers that really help.
Absolutely, and it's those ongoing showers and the drizzle that really make the environment wet and that really stop fire hazard. It's not the, you know, half-hour Midwestern rain squalls. All that evaporates off in an hour of sunshine. But it's an advantage of our environment here. The demystification of forest fire. This is an image of a plume on the tripod fire in Washington State. I think I spent something like 3 weeks on that fire. This is what a large active forest fire often looks like from a very long ways away. I essentially have it in here since it's a neat image, and it expresses a sense of how that sort of a forest fire, the amount of energy being released in it, the only analogs I can really think of in my life, having seen a bunch of these up close, is a volcanic eruption or an atomic bomb. They're very impressive natural events. That said, our odds of seeing things like this here are still, as far as I understand, extremely low. The Kenai in general is not a big fire environment, but there are interior areas on it that are much more susceptible. Us on the coast here makes things more hazardous. Excuse me, like it makes things a lot less hazardous because we get more humidity. Now there is more wind, but that's what a big fire looks like from afar. It's very impressive. This is a fire in black spruce, which is where a lot of Alaska's major fire activity happens. This stuff is a fire ecology. It burns very well. But what this is really showing, you know, is how in the right circumstances it climbs up into the treetops, it spreads among them. Fire, it wants oxygen. That's why it likes wind, like it does not like water. Like a thing I actually really found, especially up here in Alaska on fires, is that I learned where water is in the environment by working on fires up here, seeing how it moves in the inverse of water in the environment. So heat rises, fire likes wind, it runs uphill. Like if you a have a have a ravine or something like that, it will suck up through it. It likes it hot, it likes it dry. It likes fuels that are packed up close on each other, and it can really rapidly shift what it's doing as the environmental situations change. Rick, have you got anything that you want to add?
Yeah, see, the one of the biggest problems that we would have here is the terrain. The terrain plays a lot in how bad these fires can get out of hand. On good open flat ground, they're quite severe, but they aren't like where it's hilly, like here with the sharp, steep hillsides, and it's hard to control them because once it starts at the bottom, it creates its own draft, and it's like a chimney effect, and it just sweeps right up the hillside, and it goes, you know, there's no stopping it, and because it has that chimney effect. And then like the ravines, that's what happens with your ravines. It has a chimney effect, and it just runs right up through the ravine to the high point, and it just carries all the heat and the fire and the sparks and everything with it. Once it gets to the top, it just passes it on to the other side. So it just goes from one valley to the next.
Yeah, and on the upside, a huge upside for us here is because we're a wet environment. Our ravines are ordinarily full of things like alder, which is actually really great. And we'll have a look at this in our environment more. Like if you head into like the Southwest and stuff, ravines were like the most terrifying thing for us. Those were the dangerous situations here. But like the great thing is having all that alder and all that moisture in ours here. There are situations where you could see fire going up through them. But a lot of them should actually act as fire breaks most of the time. So, you know, I want to say, yes, they're hazardous, but we're not saying that you should, you know, stick your house on wheels and move it out from above a ravine or anything. Like it's just like it's a way in that fire is going to flow. And a good thing, hopefully for us in a lot of instances here, is if the homes and the roads are on the downhill and the fire is going uphill, the fire is moving away from us, and it's moving up into the higher elevations where eventually it'll hit the alder, and that actually hopefully acts as a natural barrier on a lot of forest fires for us.
The other thing that you have to remember, and a lot of us that live here have experienced the smoke that has come from two of the really bad fires over in Homer, and how it was kind of eye-watering and kind of burnt the back of your throat. But the closer you are to it, and if the smoke lays right on the ground and the wind's driving it, you know, to keep it low, it is so bad that it's you can't breathe. I mean, it takes the breath right out of you. And older people that have any kind of respiratory problem, even young people, it's quite devastating. I mean, it's literally suffocating. So you have to keep that in mind, and that's why we want to try to keep from having any kind of wildfires. It's bad enough like when a house catches on fire and the black smoke from that, but this thick, dense white smoke from a wildfire, it does not go away. It stays there until the fire's actually gone or put out, and it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. And so it's another thing to really think about.
Right. Like, and I have a short video here, which is just more sort of interesting, but like it's a site that few of us ever like have an opportunity to see. And it's just like in a severe fire situation. So, you know, not like we almost ever see here. This is probably in some place like Oregon or the Rockies or the Southwest. But this is a really good insight on if you have that severe situation, what it looks like inside a fire. I'm really just showing it since it's neat. Like it's an insight on, you know, the amount of energy and violence involved. And if you have a look at this, if you see that branch blowing around, like obviously in a strong wind, this scene, it was still at the start. All that airflow is generated by the fire.
That graph line is in Celsius. So look how hot it got from when it began. This video began. It gets very, very hot.
And so you'll have that fire hit, have ordinarily a peak of intensity relatively early in that area, but then it stays hot for a while and the heavier fuels are still going. And you sort of end up in an ashy, like in a burnt out state at the end, but it's hot for quite a while, like as you can see. And we hit what's known as a moonscape in the trade. But like advancing slideshow, hold on, I gotta try to get the slideshow to go forward. So how forest fire is fought? Sometimes it's fought with water and hoses and engines and stuff like that, but very often what we're doing is we're heading out there and we're isolating the fire from fuel and letting it burn itself out essentially. So, you know, the tools are often chainsaws, shovels, Pulaskis and stuff like that. Water is great when it's available, but except it isn't our only instrument. And at the bottom left, Ian is actually lighting fire on the ground. We are firing like off of a fire line and basically burning out all of the fuel in between us and the main fire. Like at the upper right, the reason I have that image is we are sketching out a map of all of the homes and the values and everything in the area so that we know what's happening in it and how to save as much as we can. A lot of forest firefighting is also stuff like that. And like a lot of it is not high adrenaline. It's about scouting. It's about figuring out where the fire is, what it's doing, and how to fight it the most intelligently. And then at the bottom right, lots of what's known as mop up. You'll have a fire and you got to go in afterwards and you have to get all the heat out. We are in an environment that that accumulates a lot of duff on the ground, and if we have fires here, they get entrenched in that, and they may not be very active, but it's a lot of work. But we have to dig them out, or they just smolder on underground.
The picture on the bottom right actually is a good display of what it looks like after the fire has come through. But see, it's still burning in the ground, and you can see the one fella is digging at the roots of the tree, and that's what happens. It gets into the roots of the tree and it starts to burn into the tree itself. The upper part of the tree is all burned up because it burnt really quick and hot, but now it's just a slow, smoldery fire in the ground. And the duff that they're standing in isn't very deep. The duff here in underneath these big trees that we've got, in some places it's upward of 3 feet thick. So it'll burn 3 feet down into the ground. And to dig that up and just dig and dig and dig takes a lot of effort, but you have to in order to chase the fire. And what you have to do is you got to chase it until you find the fire and get that put out. Because otherwise it'll just lay there and smolder, and it creeps. It creeps really slow, but it'll just keep on creeping until it comes back up out of the ground again someplace and becomes another fire with flames, you know, burning more vegetation up.
I think the Russian smoke jumpers have a saying about their job. It is minutes of soaring like an eagle in the sky, and hold on, I'm starting on this, and days of digging like a mole in the dirt, and that's pretty accurate. So here, yeah, is more what's probably on a lot of like our minds, and that's, you know, it's structures, houses, like at the upper left, a fire like is advancing at a house. That house is entirely savable. The way that fire is moving into it is ideal, then like it's moving upwind, and that's why the smoke is streaming away from it. In fact, looking at that photo, I would say I think that house has been basically saved already. And the reason I say that is there's flame all along that fire edge, except right at the edge of that house there, I don't see flame advancing into, say, the 15 feet around it. So I think that someone headed in there, you know, had a fire engine, had a hose, had a source of water, and sprayed down that area and made it nice and wet. And the fire is just going to creep around that house. So that's a really great scene right there. Right of that on the screen, like is a house with some sprinklers on it, like up on the roof. Like if you get them there early enough, they're often very effective because they just make the whole area nice and wet. And as I said earlier, like it's not about a rainstorm. If you roll up on the place and have a big fire hose and spray a bunch of water, that is not as effective as having sprinklers going for 3 days. That sort of a thing is great for us. And an analog for us here often, of course, is like if we get a few days of steady rain, our environment is just so much more fire resistant. At the lower left is a wrapped cabin. That is a real strategy. It's basically very heavy duty aluminum foil almost. And if you have a look at the ground around it, it's been scraped clear of any vegetation as well. And so that foil is going to reflect radiant heat from that little house thing. That will also prevent embers from having a place they can land on it and start a fire on the structure and scraping away everything around it, the flame can't lap up against it. So that structure's odds are very good. I think it's going to survive, even if a fire rolls through here with, you know, a certain amount of energy. And while we might not end up ever wrapping any houses here, those are some of the principles that you can employ in a lot more subtle ways at your home in order to, you know, help make it much more fire survivable. At lower right, obviously there, like a house half engulfed, that is something that we don't want to see for a lot of reasons, because that's what we are trying to save. Although, you know, it's really, like, as I would say, it's our third priority. Our first is life. Our second is health. So life and health, and then, you know, like everything that is material, since we know how to rebuild homes, but we don't know how to rebuild people. That fire is also suddenly way harder to fight, and especially for us here in Seldovia, you know, it's because once you've got man-made things burning, that's a hazmat fire. The smoke from forest fires can be pretty nasty, but it's not really toxic in that way. I mean, forest firefighters end up eating a lot of smoke. I have. It's not good for you, but the smoke out of a house is a thing that once man-made structures are involved in a wildfire, we really need to stay out of that smoke because it's terribly dangerous for people. Anything that you want to add here, Rick?
The picture on the lower right, you know, it looks like a porch. At least it's one end of the house that has creeped into the roof. I don't know how that fire started, but I know one of the consequences of it is that if you look around it, I can see some kind of pine trees or conifers in the background. And if that kind of a fire throws off embers and drifts away, it gets into the you know, the surrounding vegetation, and then it starts a wildfire. And that's a twofold problem with the interface of the urban lifestyle that we live. And so it's part of the game. And I have been to a couple fires here that it did start the trees on fire because of what, you know, there was a shed that caught on fire and it set the trees on fire. And when we got there, the shed was pretty much gone, but the trees were burning, and they were burning all the way to the top. So this is another way that it's a really bad situation.
Here I have a little bit on air operations. This isn't all that relevant necessarily in most instances for us, but the reason I really have it in here is it's just kind of interesting. So if you aren't interested in that, it's a great like opportunity for a snack or something, but I'll just explain a little bit. You know, it's because you often see air operations on the news and in movies and stuff about kid forest firefighting. And of course, the reason is they're very dramatic and photogenic. I've worked with a bunch of air ops. We might have stuff like this happening here if we had a really significant wildfire. It's pretty dang unlikely. But left are various forms of what's called air tankers. Those are very helpful for either hitting a fire that is small and has recently started and is fairly inaccessible. They're also very helpful for like if a fire is really active and advancing and there are firefighters who are ready to go in and wrap around its advancing head and stop it, but it's really intense. Air ups are great for that. The duck is the lower left airplane there. There are a bunch in Alaska, and they actually are flying boats, and they ordinarily scoop out of lakes. So they'll fly out, operate on a forest fire with a lake nearby, and they'll just do laps. They're very effective. They are used all throughout Alaska, like on fires. I've also almost been hit by one of them. That drops out of one. I ended up flat on the ground, holding my head and everything. You don't want to be hit by those, but they're great tools. Helicopters are like Swiss Army knives of professional forest fire firefighting. They are great for scouting. They are great for dropping water on forest fires. But as Rick mentioned about, having a shed fire start a forest fire, like I've been on a forest fire that that had a helicopter wreck, and that started another forest fire. So they are very effective, but they're also very dangerous. The lower center photo there is actually of a smoke jumper airplane. There are actually instances here where I could see us using smoke jumpers for something, like if there was a start up in the hills around here. That photo I also added in here. That is in a place called Stehekin in Washington State. It is, for Washington State, extremely isolated. It is in the mountains up a lake 25 miles from the nearest road, and it only has about 50 folks living up there. So they're in a situation surprisingly similar to Seldovia, and they don't really have forest firefighters there. But the North Cascades Smoke Jumper Base is right across the mountains from them. So when they would have fires, they would order up a load of us and say, we need a load of jumpers. And we would fly over and often like end up, well, sometimes we'd go in on the fire itself, but it was extremely steep. It was rocky. It was nasty. Lots of heavy timber. But those smoke jumpers there, like, are actually on the airstrip. Since we knew all of them, the winds, we'd fly over it, throw everyone out, and the school bus would meet us. And all of a sudden, Stehekin had a hand crew. So, like, I think that those sort of inventive things are very, those would be very relevant for us if we really had to start to handle some forest fires here. And I just thought that that was kind of a neat story about a small isolated spot adapting. Anything on this, Rick? Or
No, just beautiful pictures though.
yeah, thanks. And that's also half of why I have them in here. So I think they're great photos. Yeah, a lot of these are a friend of mine, Eli, who would just snap some incredible photos. So our environment here in Seldovia, like as we spoke about earlier, we aren't really in a fire ecology, but that doesn't mean that forest fires aren't sometimes a risk. And so I sort of have, like, as I think of it, 4 of the biomes here. The high alpine, obviously, very analogous to the lower tundra. That in the right circumstances certainly can have fires. Alder and that sort of like slide chutes, ravines, moist areas, that stuff ordinarily in Alaska is a fire break. There are extreme instances in which it's not, but ordinarily, especially if it's leafed out, fire will ordinarily hit that and stop. At the lower right, like is actually the Willamette Forest in Oregon, but it was the only photo I had, I think, of an analogous environment for hours, like in the aftermath of a forest fire. This was a really hot, dry summer in Oregon. The Willamette is on the west side of the North Cascades. So like us, like it has this sort of the marine effect. So it is relatively moist, but still fire in there. But if you have a look, it's a very sort of a splotchy burn. There's still a lot of unaffected green vegetation in that, but where you had the duff and were under the trees and had all of them, the sticks on the ground and the dead stuff, has very clearly burned. And then at upper right, we have the grasses here, which some of the most active moving wildfires happen in the grass, and some of the most fatal wildfires in US history have happened in grass. So fortunately for us, it's we don't have huge expanses of this. It's more, these like isolated spots of grass.
Yeah, if you look at the one with the shows on the beach there with the ryegrass, and it's just starting to get green. Even though that is starting to green up, that dry brown will burn, and it will burn just real rapidly. And it doesn't take much of any breeze at all that little spot there would probably be gone like within a minute or so that the picture is covering. We do have that here along on our beaches. There's places along the roadside that we have it, and but mostly it's down along the ocean is where that's at.
So like here, we're just a few notes on our environment. It seems like our long-term things have been drier and warmer. So that's just a thing that we have to be alert for, that our environment may be shifting. So like as we have seen on the Kenai, we're seeing more fires. We've got, the clear cuts, and we've got these storms that have knocked a bunch of stuff down, and how much of a fire risk those are really varies with how old they are and what that specific situation is. But also, a thing that we have to acknowledge is we don't have a lot of familiarity with how things are going to burn here in an extreme fire situation, since we just don't really historically see those fires, because it's not really a great situation for forest fire. So how do things look when they are, hotter and drier than is historic here? There's a certain amount of uncertainty. But one little secret is if you're walking around in the woods, it's like if I'm assessing forest fire hazard, one of the things I'm doing is I'm listening and I'm hearing how many crackles and crunches I'm hearing. And the more I'm hearing of that as I step on stuff, and the less flexible the sticks and the grass and all of that are, the drier I know it is. But fortunately, we are mostly in an environment where things, they don't really mummify, they rot. Anything that you want to add on this one, Rick?
I like how you have about the alders posted again. What everybody has to understand, the alders are a real pain, but the thing about the alders are they don't like to burn, especially if they're a little bit green, they won't burn. The old dead alder leaves that fall on the ground, they will burn, but they have a hard time of burning. So like he said earlier, alders are actually our friend because it will protect things from the fire from spreading. And yeah, that's about the biggest thing. And the beetle activity is still going on here, and I guess up in the valley, up to Anchorage Way, the beetles are starting to get really bad up there. So we've heard lately, I've heard quite a bit of advertisement for the pest control people and wanting to, advertising to spray the trees for the beetles. And then the Anchorage Fire Department has a horrible time because of the hot, dry, dead beetle kills from the past up there on the hillside. And it's a real problem for them. And it has been over on the other side, from Homer going north. So we just have to be careful about things.
And I think we're at about 45 minutes. So I'm going to speed up on the next few slides of environmental environmental situations here, and just briefly explain them so that we can get to the Firewise items. So Rick, if you just want to interject as I get through these, if you want to add things in. So here's an example of, the ryegrass, and it's in a place where you often see it, like it is in the cut for a power line. It's up near honeybees, actually. This is a place where we had a transformer on a line actually catch fire. That's one of our hazards of the starts around here. The nice thing also is that it's got this spruce forest on either side, so we would most likely, in most situations, see the fire move in that ryegrass if it was dry, but once it hits the spruce forest on either side, it'd sort of slow down and skunk around in the duff. On the downside here at the bottom, obviously, is a road. That's a good fire break. And we'd be looking for on the uphill, is there something that's going to stop it? If it's really active, we might you stand off and wait for it to hit those natural barriers and slow down. Or if it just isn't very active, we'll just grab a hose off of our engine, run up there, spray it down. The great thing about the grass fires is if they aren't very active, water knocks them down real fast. Here is our alder situation right now. All of those leaves flat on the ground. It looks really brushy, but all of that alder is alive, and all those salmon berries, I think, are as well. So that may look really brushy, but if you wade into that, it's not really crackling. and that's a good sign. There are situations where you might have fire move through that leaf litter on the ground, but hopefully it's not going to generate that much activity. Here is a, forest area. These are limbed spruce, so not the usual, but what I think it's showing really nice is that forest underfloor of the moss and stuff. Looks a lot like the tundra. I've been in not this specific sort of a like environment, but in the tundra in the Brooks Range. I can think of a specific instance where that moss, it was all on fire, and it was probably had like 6-inch flames, and then the wind has shifted and increased about 5 miles an hour, and suddenly it was putting off 3-foot flames. So, not Hollywood, but not something that you can run up into, and something that could easily burn your house down, or is very hazardous for a person. So that can happen here, but fortunately, of course, like odds are it's going to move uphill, or it's going to move really where the airflow is shoving it. I'm right off of the water here, so that's probably that breeze is going to shove it up that hill, because ordinarily often it's blowing off the water. Here's more like the Jim Jam from our storms and stuff here. That may look like it is absolutely like it's gonna all just burn up and roar and be horrible, but those large logs are all at the yearly average fuel moisture, and that's pretty high for us. The branches and stuff are sort of spaced out in the air. If the canopies are, all red but still have the needles on them and there's fire in that, like that could certainly generate a lot of heat. Like if you have accumulations of the branches, those might generate a lot of heat as well. That might start the crowns of the trees above them on fire. But I think an emphasis is that having more of this available fuel on the ground isn't great. But the big logs and stuff, in most situations here, those really shouldn't start to burn up like a stack of firewood. So that should be somewhat reassuring. But the beetle kill is a big unknown for us in all of the dead and down, and in some of those areas where stuff is really thick on the ground. If we get a bad situation, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to do. So I would not be cavalier about that stuff for sure. And here's an example of the term is ladder fuels. All of those low branches and stuff. Like if you had a source of high heat, like underneath all that, it's going to heat all that. It's going to derive the moisture out of it, and it's going to ignite those trees. They probably won't sustain fire, but all of those needles on fire, like in the flame rushing up, is going to throw a lot of embers in the air, and those embers may be thrown a long ways and start small fires other. So that's one of the main mechanisms of spread that we would, I think, worry about here, is having the concentrations of heat that throw embers up into the air, and those start more fires. And some of our recent forest fires here, like a thing that I just want to emphasize is, say Elephant Rock. That was probably an active fire there. Well, I'm not sure I'd say active. It was burning on Elephant Rock for a few days. Folks smelled it. Then someone spotted it on the 4th of July. Had a lot of natural barriers around it that helped hold it in, and we just had to head up there and mop it up. That's kind of our usual situation here. Rick, I'm wondering if you want to speak about any of our other forest fire examples around here.
Is this the only picture example you have?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the out at Jackaloff, somebody had had a campfire, and when they left, they didn't really put it out, and they had started it in underneath some big trees, and it was in where the duff was really thick, and they thought they had it put out, but when it was called in, by the time I got there, the flames were looking up 3-4 feet up out of the ground. I mean, there wasn't any vegetation. It was just the vegetation on the ground, which was the old cones, spruce cones, and the spruce needles, and that had actually been burnt down into the ground almost 3 feet underneath those big trees. Because the older the trees are, and the bigger they are, the deeper the duff is going to be, and I didn't really understand that until I came across that with those great big trees and how deep the duff was. So, and I've had, there's been 2 out at Jackaloff that have been like that. And both were human caused.
Yeah, like, and I think an aspect of that is like, if you have those fires, yet you have to like excavate it out, like out of the ground and just hunt down that heat, because it gets really buried. So, like, onto our Firewise and our how to make your home safer. This is just a nice photo of a burnout. But I'm gonna hand it over to Rick, if you who want to lead off on this slide.
Okay, this isn't everybody's home that we see here, but this is just an example that covers most of the situations that where we live, most of our homes, and it's not that we've done anything wrong, and it's not anything that that we really were conscious of. So there's this Firewise program, and it's really simple. And if you want, you can go on the internet and you can look up www.firewise.org, and it's the Firewise program, and it has this picture in it, plus it has a listing of things to do to protect your house, so that if there is a wildfire, you'll have a better chance that your house will survive, even if you have to be evacuated because the danger is so bad. But even if you won't have to be evacuated, if there is a wildfire around your place, there's just a lot of little things that you can do to help save and protect your place. And so, yeah, just go to the Firewise program and look it up. But I mean, you don't have to go out and just start thrashing away at it until it's all done, just a little bit every day. And pretty soon you've got it so that your house is in a good situation where you don't have to worry about the fire creeping across the ground and getting it. Or even if there is a wildfire, say a half a mile away, and the embers are coming down everywhere around your place, so that you'd have to worry so bad.
And an aspect of how to think of Firewise is like, it's kind of the ideal, and it's what folks in fire environments often like are advised they do. For us, like, there are a lot of things on this that we may not do, and in fact, I'm going to show you an example here. So I'm not sure if anybody recognizes this house, in which you can see numerous infractions on the standard, but this is where I live. Now, Absolutely. Some of this is staged. I don't always have some of this like your stuff, but like at the same time, for like 11 months a year or however much, we're not really that worried like about forest fire. There are probably other things that you're worried about. One of the no-nos of Firewise is having firewood stacked underneath your house, because that can be very hazardous, like in a fire. Now, I've often had firewood stacked underneath my house here, since hypothermia is more of a risk for me, and I don't have a separate shed. Should I build a separate firewood shed? Yes, that's on my list of projects. But I also just have an awareness, okay, that's not ideal. I know why. And if we get into a fire situation, I know I'm going to want to get that stuff out of there or somehow shield it. Like a few things I want to sort of highlight in here as an example. I mean, the propane, right? Next to the house. Not a thing that you'd want in the instance of a wildfire, but also a thing that, like, in the moment, you can just grab that thing and move it away. The same thing on the gasoline, like in the jerry can there. The foam mattress and the firewood gets stacked against them at the house. Obviously, I just kind of threw all those there to show, this is a bad idea. But the sofa on the porch, I ordinarily have that there. In the event of a big fire situation, I'd want to get that out of there. Stuff like that is pretty easy. I have it fairly cleared around that house, and a lot of them, the vegetation there is things like salmon berries and in the Devil's Club. I'm not worried about this. But that roof is an asphalt shingle roof with moss on it. That is a big no-no. That thing is a fantastic ember bed. So that's a really, that's a situation that you really might not want something like that. I have plans long run to replace that with a metal roof for several reasons, but one of the best early options for me is I can get that moss off of that roof. And I'll show another great example of a mossy roof in the Seldovia area with actual saplings going on it. Rick showed me that. I'm going to hand over to Rick for a minute if you want to add in some other things here, Rick.
As seeing the thing of it is that it's a porch roof, and if you look at it, that moss looks kind of thick. Believe it or not, if you could get up close enough to it, that moss is over a foot thick. And those trees have been growing out of there for a couple of years, and they're not just little anymore. And this right here, like he says, it's a bad thing. And in the summertime, when it gets really, really dry and dries out, that moss just goes completely dry. And I mean, there is no moisture left in it, and it just, it burns really good.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew and Rick, this is Laurel, and it seems that some of the things that we do that are part of our quaint Seldovia culture are the things that might be problematic. We know with bears, we love to feed our hummingbirds and we love to feed the birds, and yet those are attractants to bears. And boy, I mean, doesn't everybody love some moss on the roof,
Yeah.
I love moss on the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a thing with like as we've like you said, it's not a this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, but it's kind of like have an awareness of the risks and what makes them and how to mitigate them. Like it's kind of like the ocean here is very hazardous. If nothing else, if you go in the water, it's cold. But we go out all of them the time in boats, in small boats. We stick, hooks on things and throw them over the side and then yank them at our faces. You would think that's a terrible idea, and yet we do it all the time. It's fun. So, you know, I mean,
So common sense applies.
right, exactly.
Yes.
And also how, I mean, it's kind of like there are things that you can think about in the moment. Like, oh, there's a fire happening. I should get this stuff away from my house. There are things that you can think about a season ahead or something ahead, like where am I going to store my fuel? Where am I going to stack my firewood? There are things that you need to think about along. I'm ways ahead. I'm like, hey, like I'm going to build a house. Maybe I ought to have a metal roof instead, you know, of an asphalt shingle one, or a sod roof, or whatever. But we're also all gonna make a lot of it, of it, of it, of it, of it, of it trade-offs in our lives. And, you know, all of us probably will end up handling a lot of things in a way that isn't really optimal. Like, in an aspect of that is that, you know, that's just living in an environment like we live in. And fortunately, wildfires are a relatively low risk for us, but they aren't a non-existent risk. And we may have situations where that is an issue. I think that was sort of a long-winded answer.
That was great.
There's another thing I want you to take a look at, and it's that if you look at the big trees and how close they are to the house. Now, the tree on the left, the limbs are actually on that porch roof. Now, the next thing is, if you look and see where the chimney is at, the chimney is right there next to those limbs on that very same tree. So we have a problem here that might happen, and that's that the chimney catches the tree on fire and sets the rest of the everything on fire, including the building. And then, or like we were talking, he was talking before, is underneath the porch. Underneath the porch is all open. Well, that's okay, but there's stuff stored underneath there. So that could be a problem if there was some kind of a fire creeping across the ground. It could get up into that and then set the house on fire. So it's just one of those Firewise things a person has to stop and think about.
I want to thank Rick. You know, it's because that string of events was an excellent example. Where, like, okay, you have a chimney and maybe it has no screen on it, and that stovepipe like isn't insulated enough, or like you have something, but the branches are up against it. The stove heats up those branches and evaporates all of them, the moisture out of them, even though they're alive. That ignites those. Like embers fall off of that into the moss on the roof and light it on fire, which then also incidentally feeds into the tree again, but also it ends up in the porch roof, and so on and so forth. And like fire, from like it's very ABC. Fire often moves in ways that for us is very non-intuitive, since fire is not an animal, it is a physical force, and it is absolutely relentless and thorough. How I explain it is it sees everything. Like, and so it's kind of like if you have a route for it, it may follow it. But if you don't have a route for it and you say, well, like, here's a fire, and like if it goes A to B to C to D, I remove C, like it just goes A, B, and then it stops, and it is fine with that, you know, like it's just spreading as flame. And so if we see those linkages, oh, how do I stop that spread? But like, all right. And we are just wrapping up here and opening it up for questions in a sec. Here's, you know, again, if I would get stored under a house on the duff, it happens, it's ordinary. But if we have a fire situation, you might want to scrape everything away from there. More stacked stuff. But I'm just going to wrap it up here and open it up for questions.
So I think what I can do is I think that I can take our guests and bring them forward so that we might see everybody. Hey, look at that, whipped cream, nice. So we'll just start to have people, I think, pop up to the main group, and we'll see faces appear, I'm thinking. So
There's just one other thing I'd like here for a minute, Laurel.
Yep.
This, I hope everybody can see this. Can you see this pamphlet I'm holding up?
Yes. Why don't we, Andrew, do you mind stop sharing?
Okay, there, I can see, okay.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, this pamphlet is the Firewise pamphlet, and you can get this online. And it was at www.firewise.org, and it's a complete booklet, and it has stuff that you can do, gives examples, you can take notes, and it's pretty clear cut. It's answers, there's questions, and it's very simple. And this is all available online. So if you're really concerned, go online and you can get it.
And Rick, we also have a lot of those pamphlets here at
Yes.
Seldovia Village Tribe. If anyone wants to stop by and pick one
Yeah.
up, we have
Yeah,
them.
you can stop by and pick them up there at Alex's office.
So Rick and Andrew, one question did come up from Shannon that talked about if we're doing limbing and clearing around a structure, where do we take the waste, and is it best to schedule a controlled burn when it's safe to do so? And I think we have the borough landfill as a place to take the brush versus burning it on property right now.
Yeah.
Yes, the landfill is available so that you can load it up and take it out there so that it can be disposed of, so it can be dealt with later on. And I mean, yeah, you could store it until this fall when it's the wet, rainy season if you want to, but that's just one of the alternatives.
Yeah. And there are also, you know, like options that I don't think a lot of us have here. But for example, I'm like, if you can, you know, call it 100 feet or a few hundred feet away from your house, and just spread it out and just let it stay on the ground. Like an ideal is if you had something like a wood chipper, and you chip it up a ways from your house, like it stays on the ground, it accumulates as soil eventually. And that fuel arrangement won't hold a lot of fire to it. So then, like, it's about, you know, just having it away from your house, and in a way so that if it is on fire, you know, it won't make a giant heap of fire right next to your house, is what I'd say.
So Andrew and Rick, both the fire departments, the city fire and EMS, and the Seldovia Village Tribe, Barabara Heights Volunteer Fire Department respond together. They fought fires together and work well together. I'm wondering if you can remind us what the burn status is in each of your respective response areas before we take the last of the questions.
Okay, right. Yeah, if there's a fire call that comes in, we're both concerned, whether it's a wildfire or a structure fire, somebody's house, we're going to show up. And if if it is something that is really out of hand, especially on a wildfire, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call forestry and put them on notice that we have a problem, but we're going to deal with it the best we can. And if I need assistance here, I'll let them know that we actually need assistance to help control our problem.
So, and what is the burn status right now? And will be.
Well, right now the burn status is no burning of anything, but you can use barbecue grills that are either propane or charcoal. And but basically they don't want to have you have any type of open fire, like no burn barrels, no slash pile burning. Even if you have all the proper equipment, they just don't want it to have happen. And it basically is on account of what time of year it is. And then the other thing is because of the virus problem, they can't fly in mass amounts of wildland firefighters because of the quarantine problem. And so the state has stepped it up and put these limits on the burning, which is actually good. But there are, you know, it comes a point in time that once it gets greened up, the problem subsides quite a bit unless we have a hot, dry summer. So, but right now, that's how we stand.
Yeah, and I don't understand it as well. Like, is the state, they establish blanket policies for, you know, pretty much all of Alaska, unless they make special exceptions for areas. So they're like applying for that onto the whole state, and we really cannot locally rescind those policies. So, for instance, I have a look outside right now, and I'd say to them, like, if you want to have a campfire, I think you'd be fine in our area, in our climate here, but the state says no, so we have to say no, since we can be more restrictive locally, but not less restrictive. That's how I understand it.
Yes, and you are right. And see, and we have our own little jurisdictions, each one of our fire departments, because we have a service area that we contend with, and we can impose, we can actually add stuff to it so that it's, you know, it adds to it. But what we can't do is we can't rescind anything that the state has mandated.
Yeah.
Is there a date after the initial issuing of the burn ban? Is there a time that changed? That it so originally it said the ban does not cover cooking, warming, or signaling fires that are less than 3 feet in diameter, such as campfires. But I'm understanding you all to say that campfires are not allowed.
No, just you can, but they can't. They have to be contained and small.
Small.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And what I'm saying is, like, burn barrels are out. No burn barrels are allowed. So burn barrels kind of contained and confined. But the small fires, like down on the beach, are fine. But just, yeah, not up in the woods. I wouldn't want to see them.
Okay, great. And Mark's chatting in that as well. Great. That's excellent.
And the thing of it is, it's starting to green up. The problem is getting less and less. So.
Alex, did you see the chat with our door prize winners?
Yes, I do see that. There are no questions in question and answer. Any further questions? So the door prize winners are Sandy Murray and Mary Jo Stanley, and they'll each get a fire extinguisher. And they can get that from me, Alex. Thank you so much, Andrew and Rick, for presenting tonight. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you know, our fire chiefs are open to talk with you.
And our-
And so one other thing, the next emergency preparedness presentation, I believe, is June 18th, and the topic will be EMS, life med, police, CERT. So emergency preparation with involving these organizations. So hopefully you can attend. Then there'll be plenty of notice before that comes up. So thank you. And
folks are unmuted if they want to say a last thank you or anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Thank you.
And thanks for everybody that tuned in.
And after this is all done, so we recorded tonight's presentation, and we'll take that video and it will be embedded onto svt.org, and we'll share it onto the tribe's community news Facebook group. So if other folks weren't able to join in, they can have a listen.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks all.
So Andrew,